So we're talking about situations that impact managers today. And the first we're looking at is globalization. So globalization is the expansion of international businesses, and it's being encouraged by converging market preferences, falling trade barriers, and the integration of national economies. So if we think about, for example, the European Union, which is encouraging the free flow of people and goods across countries within Europe, that means that these barriers that used to exist, they used to mean there was one company in Germany and one company in France. There's no longer those barriers that exist. And we're starting to see companies that then want to be in all of those locations. And we're also starting to see that because of influences that span the globe, right? Technology, social media, that there's starting to be preferences for particular goods and services that aren't specific to one particular geographic location. And so the fact that you might have people who are similar in terms of preferences, who want the same product across different countries, means that businesses are expanding internationally. So there are forces that are pushing us towards more globalization. We're looking for abilities to expand into other markets. We want to gain access to resources that may not be in our current area. We're looking for ways to cut costs. And so we're moving parts of our supply chain into areas where labor is cheaper or resources are cheaper. And we might want to capitalize on special features that exist associated with that particular location. So let's look at these particular pieces. Before we do that, though, the first thing you have to consider is that is your organization, is your company ready to go global? So does going global align with the goals of your organization? So what is the reason that your company is looking at going global? How committed is your management to this? Is this something that is going to pay off? And then we have to look at the capacity of the organization to handle this. So financial capacity. Do we have the ability to fund these operations? One of the challenges we're going to look at in terms of expanding into the global markets is getting funding in other countries. You may not have any credit or be recognized in terms of not being high risk if it's a country so you might be seen as much higher risk, or you may have no credit if it's in a country that you haven't been in before. So for example, just from a personal perspective, right? So I am from the US originally. I moved to Canada. Well, I had credit in the US, but then when I moved to Canada, they didn't recognize my US credit. So when you go and you try to get a credit card, when you try to buy a house, or a car, I had no Canadian credit. So they're not willing to lend me money. They're not willing to give me a credit card with a credit line because they don't know whether I can be trusted to pay it back. And the challenge, of course, is that credit rating doesn't cross borders. And so then you have to essentially start over and build that credit. Well, the same is true if you're an organization, a company moving into another country, is that you haven't built up that reputation. And so you're looking for a credit line, you're looking for financial support from banks that are willing to take a guarantee from a bank in another country. And so there can be challenges in terms of that financial capacity. Do you have the financial capital to fund this global operation? Is this effort going to pay off? Do you have the production capacity? So is the present production capacity being used? If you have a factory in country and it is not producing at full capacity, it has a lot of excess, you could ramp up production with your people and your machines and your location, your facility currently, then perhaps your approach should just be in terms of exporting rather than opening up a whole nother manufacturing plant in another country. So how much additional capacity do you need at home? Do you need abroad? How much spare capacity do you have currently? Maybe there's product designs, packaging options, restrictions. So we think about, for example, if you want to sell products in Canada, they have to have both French and English labeling. Is this something that you have the ability to do as your organization, either at your current facility or do you need to create a new one in another country in order to be able to do that? And then, do you have the management experience to go global? So what kind of skills do your people have? Do they have the language experience? Do they have sales experience in other countries? Do you have partners who can help you in this process? So maybe you already have organizations that you work with that have the knowledge about the legal, the economic, the social, the customs, the norms of the people in the other countries that you're looking to expand into. And so maybe you need more of a strategic alliance where you can partner with someone who has that knowledge and expertise that you may not already have. So there are things to consider about your organization itself before you decide whether or not to go global. Once you decide to go global, the key is to look at what are you trying to get out of that. So should you go global? Well, if you're looking to expand your market, you might decide to move into other countries to increase your revenue stream, right? More customers, more clientele, selling more products, bring in more money. Perhaps you're looking at it as an opportunity to extend the life cycle of your product. You'll recall in our previous discussions, what were the stages of the life cycle of a product, right? We might do a bunch of research and development initially before we actually build the product. Then we introduce it, it grows, it hits maturity, and then it starts to decline. If we're starting to see maturity or decline in our current market, then going global and selling that particular product in another market might extend its life cycle. So we talked before about pharmaceuticals. When it comes to new drugs, then they seem to be first offered in places like the US. Well, they'll do the research and development. They have that intro and growth stage. And since the US patents on drugs are 20 years, that's no competitor for 20 years, there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. But once those 20 years are exhausted, you start to see generics come in and you hit that maturity and you start to decline. So another option then is to, during that time, apply in another country, in the European Union, in Canada, get the drugs approved in those other markets. And then when you start to hit maturity and generics in the other countries, you move into those new markets, or right before you do, you move into those new markets so you continue to extend the life cycle of your product. You might expand into new markets, as we talked about multiple times before, to help lower the cost per unit. Because if you can sell more of the same good, that means the big fixed costs, whether that's your research and development, maybe that's the infrastructure, your equipment, can be spread across all of those units. So by adding additional customers in other countries, then you're able to take advantage of economies of scale and get your cost per unit down. So those economies of scale are related to the production costs, but we can look at a similar phenomenon when it comes to knowledge and expertise. So we have experience curve efficiencies. This is the per unit savings gained, and I have a repeat word here, from the repeated production of the same product. So the idea here is that we spend a lot of time figuring out how to do things, right? The efficient way, figuring out the best way to make a particular good or provide a service. And then rather than spending a bunch of time and resources and working out the kinks on a new product, we can instead take that same product and sell it in multiple markets. And that means that we can continue to benefit from that initial investment in working out the kinks and not have to have that higher cost that comes with when we start offering something new for the first time. We also have learning effects. So we gained insights, we got experience from offering a particular product, which led to more improved performance and more efficiencies. And so we're able to continue to gather more experience and continue to improve our processes rather than having to essentially start over with a new product and work on improving its performance and experiences. So you're already down the road, you can continue building on that instead of starting fresh from the beginning. The second reason for going global is access to resources. So maybe a particular location has more of the skilled labor that you're looking for. Maybe the labor is cheaper, and so that would be the third one in terms of cutting costs. Maybe they have access to resources that you need. So if you're going to be in oil support services, you're probably going to need to be somewhere that produces oil. And so where's that location in terms of oil? And that might be why your company is located in Alberta. Maybe you need access to infrastructure. So in terms of consistent energy production, electricity, internet that is high speed. So maybe your organization is one that does a lot of virtual rendering, machine learning type thing. You need to be in a location in a country that has a high-speed internet. What we're seeing in Alberta out near like Drumheller is that companies are popping up to take advantage of the natural gas wells that no longer produce enough natural gas to make it viable to sell natural gas. But there's still enough natural gas coming out of these wells to use it to generate electricity for an operation located at that location. And so what we're seeing is popping up is more and more at old natural gas wells, basically Bitcoin mining type operations, because you can put a number of trailers and use that natural gas well in order to generate that electricity, that power to run your server farm in your trailers. So it's access to resources in terms of infrastructure, in terms of electricity, in terms of power, in terms of high-speed internet. So we said in terms of going global, we're looking at expanding markets, more customers, the same products to more people, and that means we can spread out our costs and use our current expertise. We can sustain the life cycle of the product a little longer. We want access to resources, including labor, raw materials, and infrastructure. And then the third is we might go global to cut costs. So the first step typically in going global for an organization is to outsource part of the production process to foreign businesses. So we might have a contract with an independent provider, have somebody else make parts of our product in locations where labor is cheaper or where the raw materials are available. So what we're doing is we're now expanding our supply chain globally. Offshoring is when you relocate your own operations abroad. So you might decide, instead of just working with other companies in other countries, you might relocate your operations itself in order to reduce your costs in terms of where you're located. Maybe the cost of living is cheaper, so you can move your employees to that new location. And the fourth reason you should go global is to capitalize on special features of locations. So we can think about, for example, Brexit. So Great Britain used to be part of the European Union, and then they exited. So the British exit is Brexit. And we need to look at the impact that has on companies and where they are located. So there were a number of companies. There were finance companies. There were companies like Nissan that had moved to Britain to get access to the European market. And so the challenge, though, is when Brexit occurred, there were now trade barriers, additional costs to move materials between Britain and Europe, and restrictions in terms of the flow of the workforce, in terms of employees. And so the reason these companies had originally located themselves in UK was to access the European Union, and now they had no longer had access to the European Union. So many of these companies relocated to Germany to maintain that access to the European Union. Well, if you're a company that provides products to Nissan, and Nissan has moved their manufacturing plants to Germany to access the European market and left Britain behind, then you might also have to leave Britain behind and follow your largest client to where they're located. So if you're providing tires or engines to Nissan, you need to be where Nissan is and so you're moving with them. So you might capitalize on special features of a location because you are moving to it to avoid trade barriers. You're following a client that has relocated there. And then the final reason you might want to capitalize on the special features of a location might be you want to use the image of that location in your branding. So for example, if you are a company that's associated with coffee production and sales, you might want to be located in Colombia because Colombia has an image of being high quality coffee. And so your company must offer high quality coffee because you're from Colombia. Or maybe you are involved in creation of video games or movies, and you want it to have an anime component to it. So you locate your organization in Japan because quality anime is seen as coming from Japan. Or maybe you're a watch company and you want to be seen as high quality precision, and the association of precision watches is with Switzerland. So by having your company be in Switzerland, you are associated with the reputation of these other Swiss companies. If we think about, Alberta, we can think about beer. So when we hear about beer companies, these small craft breweries, we hear about ones in Alberta, we hear about ones in Colorado. We don't hear a whole lot about craft beer coming out of Saskatchewan. Yet, to grow and to make beer, you can get the same products, the same resources in Saskatchewan and in Alberta, right? You need to grow hops. And so why are we hearing about craft beers in Alberta and less about craft beer companies in Saskatchewan? Well, if we look at a lot of the beer companies, what are they using in terms of branding? Right, so we see that a lot of beer companies associate themselves with the Rocky Mountains, with the wilderness, with mountains and snow. And the idea here is that, they want their beer to be a manly beer, a beer for the rugged outdoorsman. And when we drink beer, we want it to be cool and refreshing. And so what's more refreshing than the wide open mountains and forests? And so companies are locating themselves along the Rocky Mountains because they want to be associated with that outdoors lifestyle and that refreshing air of the mountains, because it creates an image and a brand that helps to sell their product. So you might choose then to have your company be located in a certain region because you want the image of the region to help you in terms of your brand recognition. Here's an infographic. It comes from the Visual Capitalist. Visual Capitalist is a great website to go to get all kinds of charts and graphs. And this particular one looks at the world's best and worst places to do business, and it's coming out of data from 2019. So as you're deciding to go global, one thing you're looking at is, where should I be located? Where's the best place for me to do business? And so what this outlines is that as you're considering going global, you need to look at things like the ease of starting the ease of starting up your business. So how much rules and restrictions are there in your location? How difficult is it to get credit? We talked about the financing. Do they have the electricity and stable infrastructure that you need? How well is the government in terms of enforcing contracts? Making sure people pay what they've agreed to pay. What are the taxes like? What are the labor regulations like? How is it to deal with construction permits, right? How much bribes do we have to pay in order to get things done? How easy is it to move supplies and people across the border? So there's a number of different factors that they're looking at here in terms of the ease of doing business. And on this graph, what you can see is the lighter the green, so into the yellow, you can see the companies the countries where it is the best to do business, because there is more protections, less restrictions, more support for businesses to start up. And so you can see here New Zealand, Singapore, Denmark, Hong Kong are rated some of the top places to locate your business. And then the darker the colors, the more you get into the kind of the blue and purples, then that's more of the worst places to do business. Where there's more corruption, where there's more you have to pay bribes to get things done, where there's more uncertainty as to whether, people who've signed contracts with you will ever fulfill their end of the bargain, where electricity may not be consistent, and those types of things that make it challenging to be a profitable business entering the market.